Hey, Catalyst community. Long COVID or long hauler COVID, it's something that appears to be influencing as much as 10% of the population right now. And it's something that we wanted to bring to the forefront. There's not a lot of research on this yet, but we wanted to get it out there and create that conversation. Unfortunately, fortunately for us in terms of insights, but unfortunately for him, Matt Fitzgerald, the best-selling author, is dealing with this himself right now. And he was kind enough to come on and share his insights, the things that he's learning, what he's going through, and the approach that he's taking that I think could be helpful to a lot of folks out there. So as always, this is an advanced, unedited video version of an episode that'll hit the Catalyst Health, Wellness, and Performance Coaching podcast in a few weeks. But we wanted to get this out to our subscribers here on the YouTube coaching channel ASAP. So we literally rushed this. I mean, it is the fastest we've turned one around. We want to get it out to you ASAP. So if you are not yet a subscriber here on the YouTube coaching channel, that's an easy way to tell us you like what we're doing. So let's jump into this interview. I think you're going to find it very, very insightful. Really brings a lot of stuff to light. And then let's go be a catalyst. All right. Well, very special guest today. You know Matt Fitzgerald. He was on here a couple of years ago. Not a good reason to have him on today, but an important reason. And that is to talk about the long hauler COVID or long COVID, a lot of different names for it. Matt, welcome to the Catalyst Health, Wellness, Performance Coaching podcast. I wish it were for a different reason.
Yeah, but life goes on. So it's good to be back. I'm still breathing, so I might as well do fun stuff like talk to you.
Exactly. Well, let's give people an update on your story. They know of you. You write a lot about endurance. One of my favorite all-time books, Iron War. You're well known for the 80-20 principle. We'll talk about your comeback book. That hell was that for timing, huh, brother?
Right.
So we'll talk about that towards the end. But give people the last, since early October, what's been happening? What were your discoveries? Just kind of catch us up here.
Sure. So I got sick back in March. I'm pretty sure it was COVID. Those are the days when it was very hard to get tested. And even by the time I was able to get an antibody test, it was kind of too late. I had actually a negative antibody test, but looks like a duck, walks like a duck, et cetera, et cetera. It was COVID. I'm an odd case because they're estimating about 10% of people who get it and recover end up as so-called long haulers, right, where you're just kind of messed up and you stay messed up. For me, I recovered, was healthy for 6 months, and not just healthy, but fit, because I'd lost a lot of fitness when I was sick. And it was funny when all my athlete friends are complaining about like no races to do. Like I was like, who cares? I just had all this pent up, desire to train, and right, so had fun with it for about 6 months, and then started to go backwards in early October. I have this pet theory that for me it might have been triggered by the wildfires out here in California. That the air was really bad for weeks at a time, and it really affected me.
Interesting.
And so it wasn't long after that I started to develop. At first, I had no idea. I made like a laundry list of things it could be, sure, everything from iron deficiency to overtraining syndrome, but was able to go through a process of elimination. And I still don't have. At this point, it's undiagnosable.
Right, right.
But I've networked with a lot of long haulers, done my research, and sometimes I get goose flesh talking to other people because it's uncanny, how similar our experiences are. So just about 4 months into this new chapter of my life now, and there's no trajectory to it at all. Like it's constantly evolving, but if people keep using this word recovery, it's like, speedy recovery. How's your recovery going? And I'm like, that's not it. That's not. I'm living with a condition. I am not recovering from it, right, from an illness.
Right.
So yeah, that's where I am now.
Well, one of the reasons we wanted to get you on is a lot of our listeners, I'm afraid, and I know I've fallen into this boat prior to hearing about your story and Dr. Tamsin Lewis' story out of the UK, that we feel bulletproof. It's like, you know what? I'm healthy. I eat well. I'm pretty fast. I'm fit. Dude, you had just run what, a 1:14:30 or something a year ago? I mean, you were at the top of your game for the half marathon. Didn't you have a pretty good outing there where you were testing your fitness?
Well, I contracted the virus in Atlanta where I ran the Atlanta Marathon and I killed it. I ran a really great. I was for a 48-year-old man, I was
Right.
super fit. Yeah, for
Right.
sure.
So I think our hope is that folks that maybe are feeling a little bulletproof look at Matt and say, whoa, wait. Matt's not like a weekend warrior. Matt's not like this guy that's kind of casually into it and he's kind of doing it. He's one of us, folks. He's one of those people that is all in. He's coaching people. He knows his stuff. He's studying this on a regular basis. He was performing well, and here he is now. So, current status, you kind of updated us on that. You shared a really interesting article with me, and I wanted to tee that up. It pointed to 3 distinct phenomena tied to this long hauler COVID. Can you set that up as a baseline for our conversation today a little bit?
Yeah. I've been, sometimes I put myself in the shoe, like, what if I hadn't gotten COVID? And, with that whole bulletproof thing, I can't deny that I would probably feel a little bit bulletproof,
Yeah.
and same thing with, I see all this confusion surrounding like long COVID and what it is. And for me, I'm sort of getting annoyed by it. But then I think, you know what? Like, if I weren't so personally interested in the phenomenon, I probably would not know much about it either.
Right.
So
Right.
I think it's helpful to just tease apart these 3 distinct phenomena. One is if you've got the virus, so you're sick from active virus in your body. Everyone knows all about that. Another is you can have, especially if you get really sick, if you're one of these people who ends up in the hospital with it, you can have, but even not, you can get a moderate version of the illness. You can end up with long-term or even permanent organ damage. So it can mess up your heart. Like myocarditis. You see these young athletes just keeling over and dying from what COVID has done to their heart. And so you can end up with inflammation in your brain. There are people I know people who've had aneurysms as a result of COVID. So that's phenomenon number 2. Like you've recovered from the virus, but it has damaged organs in your body, and you may or may not recover from that. And then third, distinct from that, is this what they're calling post-acute COVID-19 syndrome, which is that's the long haul thing, and it's not the active virus, it's not the long-term organ damage. Like for me, it turns out actually my heart is messed up. Separate conversation. It actually has nothing to do with COVID. It's just one of the, if you get enough tests,
they'll find something.
They'll find something.
Right.
So, but for me, like everything else checks out, so I had, lung function tests, blood work, all this stuff. And they're like, you're the healthiest person we've ever seen. It's like, I sure don't feel like it.
Right.
And so that's long COVID for you. And something I've learned is that like this sort of thing is not uncommon after a viral infection. So other viruses besides COVID, this is a known thing. You can end up with what are known as dysautonomias, which is where your autonomic nervous system has trouble just regulating functions like blood pressure, heart rate, breathing, even perspiration, even gut function. And then chronic fatigue syndrome, often people who now that actually is a recognized diagnosis. So people who are diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, that is often post-viral. So people get a really bad flu, or like the previous SARS epidemic, a decade or so back.
Right.
Some of those people came out of it and were diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome. So that's the long haul thing. And there's a debate about whether well, welcome to your new life. Like you just got it, almost like an autoimmune disease. Like,
right.
Or if it is, if it is something that you could potentially recover from, if it could be treatable in some way. It's a big question mark.
Yeah, just haven't had enough time. Okay, good. Let's run through a bunch of questions. We have obviously in our line of work, we've been interacting with folks that are battling their way through this, either the long or the shorter term. Let's talk the long COVID specifically. And I know you don't have the answers to all these things. So just from what you've read, what you've found, et cetera, just give us the best insights you've got. Do we know at all why some people get the long haul COVID and some don't? Is it related to, I've heard some indication of maybe, O blood type is a little bit more resistant, and A positive, maybe not so much, run down? Are there any correlations here, or at least relatable concepts that are worth talking about?
Two things I do know, that they're sort of demographic clues. One is that it affects a lot more women
I
than
saw that.
men.
Yeah.
And so I'm a bit of a unicorn in that regard. And so that's one thing. Obviously, men and women are biologically different, and there are lots of illnesses that affect one sex
Sure.
more than the other, and this just seems to be one that skews more female. And interestingly, I've also seen reporting that long haulers are typically people who were younger, healthier at the outset, and didn't get that sick, were not hospitalized. So in that sense, like I fit the demographic personally. And the theory behind that is that it's actually, it is very much like an autoimmune disease where, the long haul has something to do with your immune system going to war with your own body. So that would sort of make sense. Like if you're younger, healthier, fitter, and you've got this nice, robust immune system, it actually becomes your own worst enemy once you've gotten the virus. So that's a possibility. Other than that, in terms of like, there probably is, there's almost certainly some kind of, there are almost certainly genetic factors that would, either protect you or predispose you. But though, as far as I know, nothing is known about those.
Interesting. And we don't know, the vaccine hasn't been out long enough to know if there's any reduction in long haul with the use of the vaccine or elimination of it. We just don't know. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm curious about that. There was a great piece in the New York Times yesterday about kind of about this stuff. That there's a new book out about sort of these chronic conditions like Lyme disease, which it's a very similar experience for a lot of people. And there they have found, like, if you end up with chronic fatigue or something that's post-bacterial infection, apparently there's a lot of debate in medicine about this, but there's at least a fair amount of anecdotal evidence and some scientific backing for the idea that high dose antibiotic, a regimen like could go on for like a year, 18 months of just smacking your body with antibiotics, that can actually help people kind of get out of the rut of,
Really?
but that's for bacteria. Okay. For virus, who knows? But sort of the functional equivalent of that would be, like a vaccine type of treatment, like antibodies or something like that. So maybe there's something to that. I'm sort of like the irrational, hopeful part of me is hoping like when my turn comes around and I get the vaccine. Well, let me back up and say, another unknown is whether the long haul thing has something to do with virus still like lurking around undetectably in the body, or if it's just the virus did something to you and then left its calling card. That's unknown. If it's the former, if it is actually the virus still working its dark magic, then maybe something like that could work as a therapeutic. Whether it's one or two shots of a vaccine, probably not, because you would probably start seeing that chatter now, because enough long haulers probably have gotten the vaccine that you would hear them shouting from the mountaintop, "I'm cured."
Right.
I haven't heard that yet. So who knows? That's one possibility.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Hopefully we'll know more about that just in the next few weeks as more people are getting those. Are there, I'm asking a question that you don't know the answer to, but any guesses as to how long it lasts for most people? And you kind of implied we not only do we not know, but we're kind of assuming this might just be the new you.
Right. Yeah. It's, when I first, I told you I went through this process of elimination, trying to, figure out what was wrong with me, and I sort of settled in on long COVID. that's when I started, reading up,
Right, right.
doing my research, and I kept coming across this phrase, symptoms persisting for months, and I got so fed up with that phrase because I'm like, why are you saying that? Like, it's only been around for
Right,
months, so it's a total hedge. Like, are you just avoiding saying probably permanent? Like, but no one would
we
go
just don't
there.
know.
No,
Right.
no one would back up and say not enough time has passed. And so, it's interesting because you learn a lot about yourself when you go through something like this. And for me, I almost immediately went into this mode, and this was instinctive. It wasn't a plan. Like, I went into this mode of assuming I wasn't going to get better. And I
Mm,
thought, like, well, that seems really pessimistic, Matt, but I don't think that's really what it was. I wanted to kind of assume the worst and develop coping mechanisms around that, and then be pleasantly surprised. I'm not fatalistic. I'm taking active steps to
right,
get better,
right.
but in terms of, like, dealing with it now, I just feel, and it's kind of the athlete in me, I just think it's dangerous to pin your happiness on factors you can't control. Like, I just instinctively, I don't do that. So, people, that's another word. I'm giving you a long list of words and phrases I don't like, but another one I really don't like is hope. Like, people keep saying, oh, I hope this, I hope that. I'm like, shut up. Like,
Mm.
I am not hoping. I'm wanting in the abstract.
And you're
I'm
working.
wanting. Yeah, I'm
Right.
wanting and I'm working. But, like, in terms of, like, I want to find a way. Sort of my challenge to myself is, like, how happy can you be when you feel physically miserable all day, every
Yeah,
day? Like
yeah.
that, because if I can, if you know, if I can get to that point, I'm golden.
The Stoics would be proud, my friend.
Yes.
The Stoics would be proud. I just read yesterday a quote. I think it was Epictetus was saying, "The body doesn't ruin the mind unless the mind injuries are." It wasn't talking about injuries, talking about illness. Illness to the body doesn't affect the mind unless the mind decides that it's going to let it. And that's exactly the
Right.
approach you're taking. So I love that. It seems from what I've read, heard, that it's kind of a roller coaster of good days, bad days. Is that what you're also experiencing, where you're like, and good would be in quotes here, not compared to your last March but have you noticed that where, okay, today's kind of a 6. Oh man, I'm back to a 2. Or are you pretty much constant? What are you seeing there?
Roller coaster. It's sort of on two levels. So there's, like, the kind of the general, and then the specific, or the overall picture, and the details. Like, if I had to give an overall rating, 1 to 10, on how I feel, from day to day, that will go up and down. But then, just as an exercise, I listed out all of the specific symptoms I've experienced since the onset of this.
Mm-hmm.
And it was 21 symptoms, and some of them are like maybes. It can
Sure,
be hard to tell. Like,
sure,
can I
sure.
pin that on COVID?
Right.
Um, but there's a constant evolution in those. So, I might give, today a 4 and tomorrow a 6 in terms of how I feel overall. But the actual specific symptoms underlying that, the picture could change a lot. I'll give you an example, a couple of examples. Very early on, one of the early symptoms was excessive thirst. Like, I had this just
Really?
unslakable thirst, which, it's like, that's associated with diabetes. Like,
Right.
it can be low blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, and so those are on my list. But that's gone now. Like, I don't have that anymore. But it was clearly, I mean, it was right after the initial onset of this. So it was clearly
Right.
part of the whole package. Another one is, like, numbness, tingling in the
Mm-hmm.
extremities.
Yeah.
Like, at times that has been severe. Like, I've
Which can also be related to diabetes.
right, yeah, yeah, like, yeah, exactly, neuropathy. But, so, at times I've had, like, especially during activity, like, I had my entire left leg right up to the buttock go numb, to the point where I actually had to look down because I wouldn't know if my foot was on the ground otherwise. But that's mostly gone now.
And no
I don't.
history of sacroiliac issues or lumbosacral issues or was this flaring something up that was somewhat there before? Or you're like, dude, I haven't had leg pain from, low back issues ever.
No, that was
interesting.
Completely novel symptom. Yeah.
Wow.
They looked at, because they've done everything. Like my doctor thought, well, maybe you've got a bulging disc. I'm like, well, that would explain 1 out of 21 symptoms. Like that's part of what makes me pull my hair out. The reductionism you see in medicine. But so they've looked, for that sort of thing, and nothing.
And as far as follow-up testing, blood work, you said there's really, at this point, there's nothing. Like there's nothing that people listening to this who are wondering, well, maybe that's kind of me. Maybe I'm not struggling as much as Matt is, but I'm just not myself. At this point, there's really nothing they can go in and have a blood test done or check their mineral levels or anything like that. It's just kind of a waiting game. Is that accurate, or is there something there that we haven't talked about?
Well, in terms of like diagnosis, I mean, if you know for sure you had COVID, that's helpful. I'm not even there. Like, there's this new term coined by just another writer, undocumented long haulers. So I'm part of that category. Especially those of us who got sick very early on. A lot of us, we just weren't able to get tested, and even by the time we were able to get an antibody test, it was useless, like just total anyway. So there's that. I mean, so that can help in terms of like knowing, but I mean, even something like, let's say that you had COVID, it, you've got some classic long haul symptoms now, and you still want some sort of closure or answer. It's not like, it could be chronic fatigue syndrome. There's no test to diagnose that. I've heard about something brand new. It's kind of in a research phase out of Canada, kind of a 2-part test that they think could actually be the first definitive test for chronic fatigue syndrome. But that's a maybe, and it's brand new. It's it's in the research phase. It's not in the clinical phase now. So yeah, it's kind of tough. If it's something more like a dysautonomia, like POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, there's a test for that. So you can get sort of certain diagnoses out of this, but mostly it's just, kind of symptom management.
Speaking of management, I want to talk about the mental side, the mindset side that you've talked about in your book here in a minute, but anything that folks can do that you've discovered either personally or in what you've read that they can self-treat to help with the fatigue, the brain fog, the maybe breathing difficulties, the night sweats. Is there anything that you've noticed has brought it from here to not here, but maybe here?
I guess, one thing I've been focused on is the exercise piece, because obviously I'm an addict.
Right.
And also, exercise is good as prevention and treatment for almost any health condition you can name.
Yeah.
The sad irony here is that there are exceptions, and chronic fatigue syndrome is one. And so my instinct was, when I first started to feel, the first thing that was affected was my running, so, I'm not an idiot, when I was still feeling like something's wrong, but I felt basically healthy still, I immediately eliminated like all high intensity training, all like anything that would be super stressful. I eliminated that, but I continued to unravel. So I kept like, retreating in minimal increments from what I wanted to be doing. And then I started, what I wanted to do was like do as much as was helpful and not so much that I would be harming because I knew I could easily do too much, and I didn't want to do that, but I also didn't want to give up any more than necessary. Right. So it was a matter of like a balancing act. And I kind of enjoyed the challenge. It's sort of like, you're training for a marathon and you develop an injury 6 weeks out. You don't want that to happen, but you can enjoy the challenge. It's sort of like hitting a bad tee shot in golf. And like, some people are good at scrambling. It's like, can't practice for this, but I'm enjoying the challenge of trying to get up and down. So it was a bit like that. I was trying to game it. It was just a way of staying positive about a bad situation. But then I started to wonder, like, am I fooling myself? Am I actually, doing more harm than good with exercise? And so anyway, with chronic fatigue syndrome, there's this phenomenon called post-exertional malaise. And what it is like, if you're, and they really mean exertion, not exercise. It can be like any sort of like activity that, that's imposes any kind of physical stress. 18 to 72 hours later, you can get walloped, like your symptoms are exacerbated. And I was still running enough, like frequently enough, that there was no way for me to tell. All I knew was that my that particular symptom, the exhaustion, was getting worse. Like it was becoming pretty debilitating. And so I thought, you know what, I should just pull the plug on running to see, give it, for more than 72 hours anyway, to see if I get some kind of, that would be a Pyrrhic victory, right? Like, it's like, oh, I feel better now. And now I can never run again.
Right. Thanks.
So,
thanks very much.
So that, like, if you're an athlete, so that's one big piece, to try and like find that balance. It's like, you want to do some, but you really have to be careful not to do too much.
You mentioned earlier about the discouragement with people saying, "Are you recovering? How's your recovery? Are you making a recovery?" What recommendations would you give to the person who is married to somebody with long COVID, or a close friend, or a coaching client, a coworker? What is the best way to approach that? Because it's hard to find the words. What, as someone who's hearing that and inside you're like, ugh, what can we say? What can we do in that case that would be helpful in some way?
Yeah, great question. I guess, I would tell everyone to do what my wife is doing. I feel very lucky in that regard, because, there was this moment when I was sick back in March that I reflect on a lot. That was just, to me, is symbolic. So for me, the worst symptom when I had the virus was this dry cough, and like for me, it was incredibly violent coughing, and I would cough up blood, I would cough up my breakfast, and I coughed so hard I injured several ribs, and then every time I coughed after that, and I would have like full on like half-hour coughing fits right after I woke up, and then right before I went to bed every day. And those were just indescribably excruciating experiences, like literally like being stabbed in the lung with a letter opener 600 times. 20 coughs a minute times 30 minutes with, I don't know, I couldn't get to a hospital because they wouldn't let me in, but I don't know what I did to my ribs, but it was unimaginably painful. And when I was going through those fits, my wife is in the house, she sees that happening. She didn't say a word. She just went on with her business, because she knows me. She knows me
soon.
Honestly, like she acted like it wasn't even happening. She wouldn't rub my back, and she wouldn't say, "Oh, I'm so sorry." She just let it happen. And like, every marriage is different, but she knew. It's not that she didn't care. She cared very much. It had to be torture for her too, right. To see me going through that. But she gave me, she knows me so well. She gave me space where I needed it. And then she was there for me, in ways that, she knew would actually, the help I actually needed from her, she was there to provide. And that's, so you sort of every couple, or every, even if it's like, my brothers too, like they're involved, and they know me very well, and they play their role right based on who I am as a person. I do keep my own counsel. I like to sort of figure things out for myself, but they'll do things like, they'll read an article that they think might be helpful and share it with me.
And that's not irritating. You're not sick of people sending you stuff. You're just like, you know what, they're trying.
Yeah, there are plenty of quacks out there, and that's why when I sort of went public with what I was going through, I knew that I was going to hear from the quacks.
Totally.
What's really going on with you is like demon possession. You need an exorcism.
Right.
So there's that. But So yeah, I would just think like, don't automatically do what you feel like doing, to help a person who's going through this. Think about who they are, and what will actually be helpful for them, because it's, each of us is an individual human being who, we want help in different forms, support in different forms.
That is tremendous advice, not just for this. That's life stuff. That's awesome.
Sure.
I want to circle back to something you said about filtering out the quacks. Let's take this. You can use COVID as the example, but let's make this more broad for folks that are listening. There's just so much baloney out there. I mean, that's what we try to do here on the podcast, is have established researchers and authors we trust and athletes that we know have been through the ringer and come out the other side. But what would be some of your recommendations, or what are some of the strategies you've taken, both with this, but also with general life and the research you've done for all your books, to filter that out? Because it's ridiculous. And some of them come across very charismatically, but they just don't have the credentials behind what they're doing.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would ask myself, or, contemplate a version of it before all of this, just in terms of, I'm in a role where I'm trying to give athletes sound advice on, training, nutrition, psychology, and I'm in competition with, experts and pseudo experts with different viewpoints. And sometimes I'm like, why are you listening to that guy?
Right.
And so, I mean, you can't be an expert on everything, but what you do have to be an expert on, if you want to succeed as an athlete or stay healthy, is an expert on choosing experts.
The filtering. The filtering process.
You need to know whom to trust. And some people, they just don't have it in them. Like I mean, it's true. Like, I mean, they're like, take like conspiracy theories. There's a psychological type that is predisposed to go down that road. And I don't know what you can do, because, like, I don't know what you do for those folks, but for those who, because again, you're not an expert on everything. So what I recommend, I guess, I'll put it this way. My approach has been, be open, but skeptical, and so I don't want to be one of those ultra skeptics who's like, oh, I've got it all figured out, or like, only something that has had 20 studies done on it is, am I going to try? Because I think that's too limiting. Like I've, one of my long hauler friends that I've made in this process, just recently, she told me, hey, I started taking these herbs, and she got sick around the same time I did, has really been going through it. And she said, and she's a runner too. And, she said, I started taking these herbs, and I was able to run for the first time in months. And she said, you might want to try it. No reason not to try it.
There's not a downside.
Exactly. And let's think about it. Like, even if getting back to sports, like a lot of, like, the practices that are, like, empirically proven to work were first just like, some whack job's random idea that he tried. It's like the coaches are often way ahead of the scientists. Right. So don't forget that. Just like, if it can't hurt, and there's like, I mean, you can't try everything, and nor should you. But if something like seems worth a try, even if it's only based on anecdote, don't filter out too much. But also, I mean,
think about what the person has in it too. Are they selling the herb?
Sure. Yes,
or
exactly.
This friend of yours who, hey, I've tried this, it helped me, it might be worth a try. And then number of variables too. I know you're good about this. You don't want to change 6 variables at once. If you're trying the herbs, try the herbs, but don't try it with 7 other things, because then you have no idea what helped you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Same thing I did with the exercise, like trying not running for, like, I couldn't do that and 3 other things at the same time, because, I would have no clue what.
You have no idea what's going on. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm hearing my professor's voice in my head. Brad, you can't check that many variables on your study. But Mark and Martin, come on, this would be so cool. Yes, Brad, it would be cool, but it's not possible. All right, let's talk about your book. The Comeback Quotient, just released, came out in December, right?
Yep.
Talk about timing. Are there strategies from that book that have been helpful to you as you've worked your way through this journey? And I don't want to keep this only, I want you to talk about for COVID, but then let's extrapolate to other stuff folks are going through, because we're always in the midst of our own comeback in some way, whether it's an injury or a career or a relationship or whatever. So let's start with COVID, and then let's broaden this thing out a little bit in some of the strategy that you provide.
Sure. Yeah. So, a big part of coaching is, I mean, you're really sort of like an uncredentialed psychologist
Absolutely.
On a lot of levels. And I just have a huge interest in it. Even as an athlete myself, like part of, I started running when I was 11, was still getting after it at 48. And, my body wasn't getting stronger, but my mind was,
right.
And I loved that. Like that journey could continue as long as you chose to pursue it. And as a coach, I've been at it long enough and have had, such an abiding interest in the mental side of the sport that I've developed my own approach and my own sense of like what mental fitness is and how to cultivate it. And for me, getting back to the Stoics and the Buddhists and the Transcendentalists and the humanist psychologists, for me, it's all about the ability and willingness to fully face reality. Like that's it. That is mental fitness to me. The ability to, when the SHIT hits the fan, to be able to first accept, then embrace, and then address reality just as it is, not wishing it were otherwise. Mm-hmm. Just saying, okay, this isn't what I wanted, but I'm not quitting. So let's identify the problem and start solving it. And that's what I try to do in my own life, in my own athletics. That's the place I try to get. I call it the folks who are the Jedi masters of this, ultra realists. And so that's what I want everyone to become, or work toward becoming. And yeah, I mean, sport is just a microcosm of life. So when I first got sick and then became a long hauler, I believe in this stuff, and within the book, I wanted to show people that I practice what I preach. So there are like these interstitial mini chapters in there where I make my own comeback as an Ironman triathlete. So I had done one Ironman back in 2002 when I was 31, and hadn't done one since, largely because of injuries and such, and a focus on running. But so I decided to do another one at 47 or whatever.
Just a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so and it was a high wire act because as I'm writing the book, I haven't run the race yet. So, it could have, I could have drowned in the lake. I could have not made it to the start line, but I wanted to show people, like, I believe in this stuff so much that, like, I'm deeply invested in my own success as an athlete. I'm not going to do something unless I think it works. Right. And so I want to show people, like, I practice this stuff. And so same deal when, something went wrong with my health, I actually believe in this stuff. So even if I never wrote another word for public consumption for the rest of my life, and it wasn't about putting on a show, this is how I would be coping. Like that is my toolkit. Yeah.
Well, and I like how you went to the broad wisdom. You mentioned the Stoics, the Buddhists, even the Bible talks about give thanks in all things, not give thanks in the things that you like. So, I mean, that is a theme that goes across all, forms of wisdom that we've seen through the ages. And it's kind of cool to see you pull that out. Any other strategies from that, wow, you just feel like now you're depending on that more than any? I think your first one of, this is reality. I'm not changing reality. I'm going to continue to work. I'm going to continue to explore, talk to folks, but this is my reality. And what am I going to do with this? Any others that would piggyback on that?
Yeah, a big piece of it is what psychologists call metacognition, which is, observing your own thoughts and emotions, like in terms of like core skills that are required, to become an ultra realist. That's a number one. See, you need, when you're just stuck inside, you're suffering, or just like any, pick your negative emotion. Like when you're stuck inside it, that emotion determines how you act. Because like you feel it and then you react to it.
Big time.
Yeah. So the only possibility to actually make choices about what you do is to, achieve that sort of metacognitive stance where you step back from what you're feeling, observe it. And it doesn't mean you're not feeling it. You can't just say, "Oh, I'm not angry anymore." You're like, where did this anger come from? What does it mean? What can I do about it? Is there something I can, step number one, like, if you can change your reality, do it, but you can't always.
Right.
So there's like, what can I do to change the interior to feel, to be less bothered by the anger, or to get over it eventually, or what have you. So that doesn't happen overnight. Like, I'm not a meditator myself, but mindfulness meditation is great training in metacognition. So the idea is just like, when you experience a negative emotion, as quickly as you're capable of it, realize that you're having the negative emotion, and then step back and analyze it. At times it's just like, you know what, like, I'm just super depressed. But even there, like, maybe just like accepting that you're depressed can make it that much better. And if it can get 1% better for now, take it.
Yeah, I was reading William Irvin, I think, wrote one of the Stoic books on the 5-second rule. He's talking about the food. If you drop a piece of food, we kind of have this joke that if it's less than 5 seconds, you're good to go. And he uses that for his Stoic test. So you realize that I'm sad, I'm depressed, I'm bummed, I'm upset, whatever. You have 5 seconds to catch it and go, but, and then what's next? So,
right. Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's good. How can folks find your book? What's the best way to follow you? What do you suggest there? And then I want to loop back to any kind of final words of wisdom here, but what's the best way to keep track of you?
My personal website is mattfitzgerald.org. I'm on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. And then for the athletes out there, my business website is 8020endurance.com.
Makes sense. Perfect. All right. So kind of wrap up anything that I haven't teed up with the right question, kind of lasting words of wisdom for folks that are, they're going through this and they're just looking for information or insights or encouragement. What can you leave us with?
Well, you did a good job with your questions. I don't know. I'm glad that folks like you are providing this type of forum. We're in a very isolated time, where, a lot of us are, just, lonely and disconnected. And I'm glad that people like you are doing what they can. And for introverts like me, there can be an inertia. You need to, like, take an active step, to create and sustain community. So I'm sort of giving advice to myself here that I would give to
That's
others.
What we all do. It's not research, it's me search, right?
Yes. So, maybe you can't go to a family barbecue this Saturday, but it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Like, do try to stay engaged with other people. And, whether it's by listening to podcasts or, starting a book club or what have you, it's way better than nothing.
Yeah, that's great. Love it. Matt, really appreciate it. Thank you for jumping on and short notice, sharing your insights, and we'll definitely stay in touch. Keep us updated on everything that you're discovering and finding. That'd be great.
Appreciate it, Brad.